Organized money.
Big fan, big fan.
So, one of the things we do on the show is tell you why everything is bad. And, you know, we get frustrated a lot because we talk about things that we experience in our daily lives that are as a result of large corporations and their market power. It frustrates us. And we talk about it, but there are other people that do something about it that see these problems in their little ecosystem, in their little world, and devise ways to beat these companies at their own game. And we have a great story about that tonight.
Yeah, so we are interviewing two, uh, I'll call them gamer lawyers. So they're
Yeah,
both lawyers,
yeah.
but they love playing video games particularly on their personal computer and personal computers. They don't share one computer. They each have their own.
Yes, I think they have their own. Yeah.
And what they noticed is that there is a monopoly or that has an app store controlling PC computing games, and that is a company called Valve, which the service is called Steam, and
Right.
they used their legal. They actually built a business model of going after these kinds of companies and have brought a number of arbitration claims for monopolization and have been very successful.
A-
And yeah,
And that's what's interesting is that they're using a process that we all think, those of us who know about it, that it's tilted on the side of corporations. This is this thing called arbitration. It's not when they go to sue, it's not in a court of law. It's in this secret kind of tribunal, and it's always thought that this means that the corporation always wins in arbitration. But they have figured out a way to use this process to their advantage in hilarious ways in some cases. And they are really frustrating this company, Valve.
yeah. So we've got Will Bucher, who's at Bucher Law, and Judson Crump at Judson Crump PC, and they are co-counsel. I believe Will is lead counsel on these games. Um, the
On these
or
cases. Yeah.
Will is the lead counsel on these cases. Both are lawyers who they're consumer protection lawyers. And Judson's firm, I'll just read this because I like it. It's a quote from his website. It's he engages in protecting ordinary folks from crushing debt, fraud, deception, harassment, identity theft, and negative credit reporting. And that's what these guys do. They one way to put it is they stand for the little guy. Another way to put it is that they engage in truly quality trolling. So there we go. Organized money up next. Please like, subscribe, and hit the notification button so that more people can get exposed to organized money. Really appreciate it. So, Will, Judson, thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so the company you've been suing is called Valve Software, and they make a platform called Steam. Now, for those of us who are not hardcore gamers, what is this? Tell us about their products, and then how many people use it. Kind of give us a background on what this area is.
Sure. Steam is the place to buy PC games. So if you have an iPhone, you're familiar with the App Store. If you have an Android phone, you're familiar with the Play Store. This is that store, but for PC games. So the service is get the game from the developer onto your computer. And if you play PC games, which is a lot of Americans, you use Steam. They are a monopoly. I don't want to say no PC gamer because there's a lot of PC gamers, but it's the place to buy games. 72% of PC games are sold nowhere else. There's literally no other place you can even attempt to buy them. This is a service used by 40 million Americans every month. Over 100 million Americans every year interact with Steam as a store, similar to how you interact with, like I said, the App Store on an iPhone.
Okay. So, because I'm an old, my remembrance of video games is you'd go to some retailer and buy an Atari cartridge or you'd buy a Nintendo game that way. You're telling me that these games that you get on your computer, they're not sent to you as a compact disc or anything like that. This is all done over the internet and they're downloaded. And the way that you get that is through Steam. Is that right?
That's right. The market for retail sales is now less than 1% of the market for PC games. That means more than 99%
Wow.
of PC games are now downloaded directly onto your computer. It's not truly impossible to find a counterexample, but it is an exceptionally small part of the market at this point.
Got it. Got it.
What is better about playing a video game on your personal computer versus, a Nintendo Switch or something like that, or your phone? Like, why do people do it?
Sure. So I think the answer is customization and abilities to sort of, get the edge of whatever you want out of that, whether that's graphics, whether that's fidelity, whether that's making modifications to customize your game, and then also just options in the market. So relative to something like console, 100 times as many games, something like that. I think Steam has over 100,000 titles, and Xbox or PlayStation is going to have maybe 1,000 or 2,000. And they're different experiences, right? I mean, the context in which you play a PC game is generally in a study or your bedroom or at a desk. People who are playing consoles, you're playing with your family, you're playing in your living room, and they're just different experiences. But a lot of it comes down to performance. Xboxes and Switches, they're sort of lowest cost, lowest denominator. What's sort of the basic thing we can get to play games? PCs are going to be the other end of the spectrum, and usually spend a lot more money on your PC rig.
Yeah, it's funny. This is how NVIDIA became a business, because they used to sell high-end graphic cards for PC games. So how many people are customers of Steam? How big is this company?
Sure. So, I mean, the answer is if you are an American who plays PC games, you are a customer of Steam. I mean, that is a slight exaggeration, but I would think a good estimate is 98% of people who play PC games are Steam customers. They're huge.
And what does that translate to in terms of raw numbers?
Sure. So, we know their tax returns. I can't share their tax returns with you, but we're talking numbers that are in the tens of billions every year in terms of money spent on this.
And millions of people using these games, using Steam to download games over the course of a year. Okay. And so what's the problem? What's the problem here? What are they? You mentioned they're a monopoly on this market. What are they charging in their app store? What's the big deal? What's the problem?
Sure. So they charge a 30%.
Why are you guys
commission.
whining all the time?
Right.
Yeah. Well, look, the problem is they're charging a commission, and that's a super competitive commission, and it's costing Americans a lot of money. So one of my clients, Greg, who's given me permission to talk about his particular case, we're talking thousands of dollars in extra spending. That's not, I'm not talking like, total spending. I'm talking the difference between the price he would have paid in a fair market and the price he did pay. And that's because on every game sold, Valve is taking a 30% cut.
So that's like the Apple App Store and the Google App Store. It's 30%. So they take the same amount.
Exactly. It's the same amount as the App Store. Although in my mind, it's even worse than the App Store, because when I buy an iPhone, I know, for better or worse, I'm part of Apple's monopoly now. And that's not a good thing, but it is something that's sort of a known reality. When I buy a PC, the operating systems made by either Linux or Microsoft, there's no sort of intuitive reason that I would be buying into a monopoly, but yet it's the exact same situation. If I want to get my PC games, I'm going to Steam.
So if you're a game developer and you make a PC game, is there anything preventing you from selling that game directly?
Well, I suppose there's capital investment, the technology to do that.
Right.
But there's the reality of reaching customers. And so this is not unique to Valve's monopoly, but one of the ways you can think about Steam is think about the market for restaurants. So we know DoorDash, Uber Eats, those sort of things. Sure, you can attempt to go out on your own, but the way people are going to find you is through the service. And now imagine instead of, I don't know, in my local area, maybe there's 20 restaurants that deliver to me. I can also go on Google Maps and easily see where they are. I drive by them on the street. I have lots of ways to find out about them. In the PC game market, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of games, or over 100,000 games. I shouldn't say hundreds of thousands. In order to be discoverable, if you are not massive, if you do not have millions of dollars behind you, the only way to effectively reach customers is through a distribution service, something like Steam. That's how your customers are going to find you. So as a technical matter, there's not like it's impossible to do direct downloads. And there are a couple of companies that have found success doing that, but they are the exception, not the rule.
So, okay, so it strikes me as sort of interesting that in 2000, I believe it was 2008, Steve Jobs introduces the App Store and says, all right, we're going to take 30% of whatever, developers charge. And then they just kept it at 30%, right? It was just a guy who said, I guess 30% seems reasonable. And then Google charges 30% and Steam charges, or Valve charges 30% for Steam. And you see sort of 30% is this price that is set across the economy for app stores because a guy thought of it in 2008.
Right.
Which to me suggests that there's not really competition because the pricing doesn't change and it's just sort of arbitrary. But okay, so we've heard about cases against Apple and Google app stores. I mean, we've actually talked about them on this podcast. This is in parallel with those cases. So how, and we're going to talk about you guys suing these guys and how you've done it, and it's a little bit unusual and weird. How do those cases against Android and the iPhone fit in with this case against Valve?
Well, I certainly think they show a model of potential antitrust liability that can be helpful here. So one of the things that is interesting about this case is there's so many anti-competitive practices that Valve engages in that it's almost overwhelming, right? Like sometimes Judson and I talk about, well, what do we want to argue in this trial? Because there's just so much. But for example, the Epic v. Google case established a precedent that when you make large payments to potential rivals or actual rivals, even when those payments don't explicitly say, hey, I'm going to stop paying you this money if you compete, the implication there is, look, if I'm giving you tens of millions of dollars, you're not going to compete against me, or at least you're not going to compete against me aggressively. And that's at least a question of fact for the jury. And in that case, that was the conclusion the jury reached. I understand the contract didn't say you can't compete, but we get it. Nobody gets this much money. And one of the things that Valve does is when there started to be potential competitors emerge, rather than just compete on price and reduce their commission, they started introducing what they would call rebates, I would call kickbacks, where if you sell over $50 million on their platform, then you get a kickback. And I view that as a very explicit, well, we don't want to actually reduce our commission, but we know that there are certain companies, giant companies that can hit these numbers. Those are our potential competitors. And so let's design a system that pays them, keeps them from coming after us because they're happy with their kickbacks.
Yeah, that's very much Google, right? Yeah.
So in that sense, I do think those cases play in here and that they provide us sort of clear guidance that yes, this conduct is wrong. Yes, it can provide a basis for liability.
But just then, Will, you talked about other anti-competitive or violative practices that Valve is engaged in. Could you talk about some of those as well?
Sure. So if you think about what does a competitor want to do to compete, Valve has foreclosed most of those avenues. So the first thing they do is if you sell your game on Steam, Valve comes after you and says it has to be the lowest price on our platform and you cannot sell your game cheaper anywhere else. And so if you're a competitor to Steam, well, the way you're going to win business is by offering lower prices. But you can't do that because if the developers are offering lower prices on your store, Steam is going to go after those developers, tell them, no, you can't do that. And so you can't compete on price.
That's an Amazon technique. So it's like they've learned from the best. They've sat at the feet of the masters. They've got the Google thing on paying for placement. They've got the Amazon thing on lowest price available. These are very, very smart cookies.
Oh,
Well,
absolutely. I mean, it almost feels like somebody gave them a menu of ways to maintain their monopoly, and they just responded like, yes, right? Like this is like a tasting menu, right? Like just everything.
All
Give me
from
it
column
all.
A, all from column B, all from
Yeah.
column C. Yeah.
So
They-
first there's
they did learn from the best. It's no accident that the CEO of the company, Gabe Newell, he used to work with Bill Gates at Microsoft before he left to start
Oh.
Valve. And in fact, he was one of the recipients of the famous Internet tidal wave memo. And so,
Oh, wow.
you know, you can add to Amazon and Apple and Google and all of them, Microsoft as well. So
You
we
know,
got
I heard about this. You know, a guy reached out to me a long time ago. Actually, it wasn't a long time ago. I just time is a flat circle, but a while ago. And he said, you know, he thinks that these guys are sort of like cooperative with Microsoft, series of companies that are like that, and that they kind of like spun off of them. They're kind of in the Microsoft coaching tree.
Look, nobody has a monopoly. Nobody has a monopoly on good ideas, Matt. These are
That's
just
right.
good ideas.
They're just all good ideas.
They're just sharing.
I don't want to get too into Microsoft because the whole LA Clippers Steve Ballmer thing is like hilarious, and
It's
people are
still
like,
in our minds.
You-
Yes.
You mean Steve Ballmer might do something illicit? That's crazy. Is it, what? All right. So, okay, like let's get to the lawsuits that you guys have brought or arbitration disputes. What happened? Who did somebody reach out to you? Are you gamers yourself? How'd you get into this?
Sure. So, I mean, I guess if you really want to go back far enough, right? I am a PC gamer, and
Oh,
it's
so
just
now
kind
we
of-
hear it. Now we see
Yeah.
it. Now we
Yeah.
see what's
That
going
looks
on.
like a gaming chair to me
Yeah.
that you're sitting
Oh,
in.
absolutely,
Yeah.
right? I mean, this is a gaming chair, and you know, I'm not just a PC gamer, but
You
I've-
pissed off the wrong customer, Valve.
yeah. Well, it's interesting to think about like who their customers are, right? Because nobody likes a middleman who's just sitting in there taking 30%, but it is sort of a reality of the industry that people have to deal with. But it's interesting talking to PC gamers for whom, if you tell them Steam is a monopoly, they're like, obviously, right? And then you talk to somebody who doesn't play PC games, and they're like, what's Steam? And so you have this really weird dichotomy of people who know nothing, or people who are like, well, obviously it's the only place to get PC games, or at least the only place to get most PC games.
Right.
But that, you know, so that is, I guess, one way in which this started. My personal origin story sort of starts on the other side of what's called mass arbitration, which we'll get into in a moment, is sort of how we brought this campaign. But I defended a company and was very successful litigating those arbitrations. And then we reached a settlement. And even though I'd won every arbitration I had appeared in that case, I'd won this case like over 100 times. I saw the settlement check. And I literally thought to myself, man, if you can make this much money losing 100 arbitrations, I mean, how much money, you know, would you make? Market's sending me a signal that, hey, if you got a case that's a righteous case you can actually win, man, maybe you're better off on the other side. And so that began sort of a journey for me of, well, you know, I'm not super happy defending giant megacorps in these cases. Seems like there's markets sending me a signal on the other side that maybe I can do better. Now, that's not an easy task, right? Getting the funding together for a new law firm of a new idea is a challenge. But ultimately, sort of the flagship case of the firm became these Steam arbitrations. And that's because the very first move when Valve was sued is they went to court and they said, Judge, every one of these cases has to be done individually. Each customer has to file their own claim individually in arbitration. And at that point,
well, let's
Yeah,
step back here, Will. Sorry, but we should explain what arbitration is, because maybe people at home don't quite know that. So when you buy a game from Steam, is there some sort of contract that you either read the terms and conditions and you don't really read them and you just click a box, or there's some sort of a sense there that the customer is agreeing that all claims would be put not in a court, but into this arbitration process? Could you describe like how that works?
Sure, absolutely. So we saw a change with two cases in the early 2000s called Concepcion and Italian Colors.
Mm-hmm.
And this process that had been designed originally for addressing the question of what do you do when you have two companies, maybe one of them is in France and one of them is in America, and they're doing a business deal. And they don't trust each other's legal systems, right? The American company doesn't want to go to the French company doesn't want to go to the US legal system. I think the judges are going to be biased.
Right.
And so they say, you know what? We don't trust each other's legal system, but we do trust this one guy or this one group of people.
Right.
And so we're going to agree in advance that if we have a dispute over this contract, this person or this organization is going to resolve the dispute for us. And so the Federal Arbitration Act was passed to enable that, to allow that to happen. And for about 100 years, that didn't really apply to consumers. But then the Supreme Court said, well, actually, we interpret this act to mean that you can do this agreement anywhere. And so now when you click the little terms of service box, not only are you agreeing to whatever terms substantively the company wants to impose, you're also agreeing that they have chosen the forum in which you will adjudicate the dispute. Right. And of course, it turns out that that can be a very different forum than the forum most Americans are used to, which is going into court, being in a courtroom, having oversight, having appeal. That process does not exist for most consumer to business disputes where you've clicked a little I agree box.
And as you say, it's an arbitration where, you know, there's some sort of tribunal. It's not a situation where there's a court record. It's usually in secret. And the most important thing, I think, for your purpose is that it's individually based, right? So, you know, not that many people are going to go to a court and sue over $50 or, I mean, you say some of these are much larger than that, but you know, some of these are small claims. Not everybody is going to go into a court and do that. Usually we have a class action process where you can put all those cases together and have a much larger number, and people can, you know, try to get their rights that way. But in arbitration, it basically prevents those class actions from happening. And every single person has to go into that arbitration session, and some people might be able to do so and some people might not. And it just it tilts the playing field on the part of the business over individual atomized consumers.
Absolutely right. The principal benefit that corporations see in imposing these clauses is that they defeat class actions. So they cannot be held accountable if they do something wrong against 40 million or 100 million Americans. They cannot be held accountable as a class. They have to go, each one's an individual arbitration, and that creates huge barriers to consumers accessing justice in the first place.
Right.
So Judson, what's the complaint in these cases?
The complaint in these cases is essentially based on the Sherman Act. It's also, we got a claim under state law, and the state law that we apply depends on where the consumer resides. Usually it's Washington state law, but the allegations are first under the Sherman Act Section 1, you know, which forbids agreements and restraint of trade, and Sherman Act Section 2, which prohibits monopolization. And, you know, as Will said, there's a number of anti-competitive things they do. The biggest one is that price parity rule that he described, where they just won't allow developers who want access to their massive chunk of the user base to reduce prices on other stores, because there are other stores that do offer lower distribution fees.
Mm-hmm.
The main one is Epic, which is 12%, and Microsoft also charges 12%. So it's not like we don't know, you know, how much it costs to run a store. Valve just keeps charging the highest fee in the industry because they can.
Right.
And so that's the essential basis of our complaint. And so
so they came in, you came in with this complaint, and the first thing that Valve does is arbitration. We have to go to arbitration. You can't come in with all these people. So what was your response to that? And how are you using the arbitration process in a kind of an interesting way to get these claims heard?
Sure. So one thing I think we should clarify, we did not come in with the class in the first instance.
I see.
Another law firm did that, and then presumably decided it was too much trouble to go through the arbitration process. And as far as I can tell, and of course, I don't know what was in those lawyers' heads, I don't know what their plans were, but for about 2 years, nothing happened. And, I saw this as, well, this is an opportunity to bring forward these cases that are meritorious cases, but that are not proceeding as a class action and that consumers have to file with individually. And first step of that response was get clients to sign up.
Okay. So and take me through the process, Judson or Will, because you're representing these consumers and you're doing it through arbitration. But tell me the method that sets this apart from, say, one by one, shot by shot.
Sure. Well, I think it is still one by one, although Val doesn't like that, but it is. The concept as a law firm is, if I just do one case, it's difficult to make that financially reasonable, because I'm going to put in a lot of effort, and it's true under the Sherman Act, if I win, I get paid. But these cases are complicated, and you might not win, and you spend a lot of money that ends up not being compensated on experts and economic investigation and these sort of costs that don't get reimbursed. And so it's not going to make economic sense to do this once. But, Judson and I both, we play a lot of games, and, one of the games Judson really likes is this format called roguelikes, which is, I guess I'll let you tell about it, Judson, but it's, you're sort of, it's a difficult mission, right? Where you're, I'm sorry, I meant Souls likes. I know Judson's over there being like, Elden Ring is like,
yes.
It's a really hard game. You get beaten, but then you go back and you do it again, and you do it again, and you do it again until you win. And so sort of my conception was, well, yeah, this is going to be tough, but, I have a great opportunity because I can do this, theoretically 40 million times. Realistically, we have over 50,000 clients, but, we got a lot of shots at this. And so rather than focus on, let's put everything in on one big case, and if we win it, we make money, and if we lose it, we don't make money, let's just keep doing this, because we know this conduct is wrong. Yeah. We know it's complicated, and we're going to hit on the winning formula eventually. We hit on it a little bit quicker than we thought we would. But, that was the concept, is to turn the disadvantages of individualized arbitration into advantages.
Okay, so you bring individual arbitration claims against Valve one by one, and you're talking about some hardcore gamers that are overcharged. Maybe a couple $1,000s would be probably the high end. These claims, there's treble damages on the Sherman Act, but how do you actually make? That's not very much money for a law firm. You can't do like a really long case and then get paid $6,000, right? So how do you actually make money as a law firm?
Sure. So first, I think people often underestimate how much is spent on PC gaming. I do not think $2,000 is the high end. I think that's pretty average for our customers, and probably even a little bit lower. I would estimate my average client's probably been harmed.
What's the largest case, like, of an individual consumer? What's the largest case of damages?
Sure. So the largest Steam spend we're aware of is around 70 grand. Wow. So if you think of the pre-treble damages of being, some fraction of that, but tens of thousands of dollars is not at all inconceivable. And like I said, think about, these are people who are making these purchases over more than a decade of monopoly. And so when you start thinking about, okay, what if I went to the movie every month and I bought 2 tickets and I spent $40 at the movies every month? Well, okay, now that gets you to $500 a year. You do that for 10 years, that's $5,000. the spending patterns of our clients look very similar to that. And so many of them have Steam spends, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, and that can result in damages that are $2,000, $3,000 by the time you run the math.
So this is similar to things I've heard.
How do you guys get like legal fees from Steam as well, or what? Like, because
Yes. It's fee shifting statute. So, yeah.
Okay. So Steam is probably unhappy that you're bringing these, because I want to get to because the economics here, like, it's important, right? I mean, if you figured out some cool way to actually make arbitration difficult, that's a really important thing, right? And so I'm guessing Steam is not enjoying the fee shifting aspect of this.
Well, and I've heard about this in other contexts. Like there is a famous, I've heard it described as arbitration swarms. And there was one somewhat famous one against DoorDash, where tens of thousands of customers sued DoorDash in arbitration. And DoorDash got so mad that they ended their arbitration process. And so this is like kind of a wormhole. Okay, if we're going to play your game, you're the one that set up these rules. I mean, I assume there are hurdles to it. Like it's supposed to be arduous, more arduous than a class action case. But you're kind of turning the tables and saying, okay, we'll play it your way and we'll just keep coming and coming and coming. Yeah,
absolutely. Right. And to be clear, Valve, like DoorDash, like Amazon, like many companies before it, did drop their ARB clause. Of course, one of the distinctions here is, unlike some other law firms who were like, oh, great, we get to go back to court. We're not letting them off the hook. We filed an arbitration. You can't just in the middle of an arbitration say, hey, I'm sorry, actually, I didn't want to force you into this forum. So, we're not just, taking that lying down. But, to give you an example of where I think there's really a lack of foresight and ability to use technology to adhere to their requirements in a way that they didn't expect. The very first thing I did is the contract says we have to negotiate in good faith for 30 days. So I sent them a letter, hey, here's my settlement proposal. Here are the claims. Here's why I think you're in a bad spot. I got all these clients. And the lawyer on the other side, who used to represent Microsoft in their antitrust cases, he writes this letter back, and I'm sure he just thought he was so clever. He said, well, the contract says this all has to be individual, and you only sent me one letter. And you need to send me an offer for each of your clients. Okay.
Thinking, he's not
I got
going to do that.
Right?
Yeah.
So, 2 weeks later, over the course of 5 to 6 days, he received 45,000 emails. And, they weren't. And, it's one of those things where it's like, look, I didn't adhere. I didn't start this process being like, hey, I'm going to do every little minute thing exactly as the contract says. Let's just do it one letter. Let's be reasonable. But, their response was, they were not pleased with that. And then, they got very angry very quickly. They sued my law firm. If you're not familiar with the U.S. justice system, you don't get to sue your opponent's lawyer. That's not how the system works. And the appellate court in the state of Washington has now found that. And so,
Awesome.
So they actually sued you personally?
Well, they sued my law firm. It's interesting. They couldn't sue me personally. And perhaps you guys can guess why they couldn't sue me personally.
No.
I have an arbitration agreement with Valve. And so if they wanted to sue me, they would have had to sue me in arbitration. The problem is if they tried to sue me in arbitration, they'd have to get at the back of the queue with 45,000 people.
Oh, that's hilarious.
So they sued my law firm because my law firm doesn't have an agreement with them. But I did think about, these guys obviously hate me. Why am I not personally named here? And I think the answer was they know they'd have to arbitrate that, and that's my turf, and they don't want to fight me on my turf.
That's so funny.
So
you're like such a troll. I love it.
Matt, you are Matt's hero.
I know, right?
So knowing that you guys are gamers and knowing that PC gaming involves a lot of interaction between gamers during the games, I have a next door neighbor that is playing games all night and is yelling clearly at people who are not in the room with them, but over the microphone or whatever. My next question is, are you finding your clients while gaming? Like, where are you finding your clients?
Sure. So, I find my clients online. It's not directly through gaming, but a lot of my clients come through Discord channels. So there's a
Sure.
app that actually attempted to become a game store and then was unable to compete because of these practices. But that is like an app that gamers communicate on.
Yeah.
And sometimes I would see, when I was getting these clients, right? I mean, at this volume, it's like, how many did I get this hour? But one time I noticed I got like 600 clients in a single hour. And I was like, what happened? And it was, some streamer who was really popular posted in his Discord channel, hey, if you're unhappy with Valve's monopoly, here's a lawyer signing people up, just posted in his channel. And so people found me that way. But certainly, different forms of social media were ultimately how we reached these clients.
Okay.
So yeah,
Sorry.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Go on. No.
All right.
Please.
So where are we at now, Judson or Will, with the status of these arbitrations? Are some of them through the process, or are they all sort of been held up with other things? Have they tried to move these out to court? What is the status of these lawsuits?
Yeah, well, the status varies because one of the things about arbitration is that a whole lot of things depend on who is your arbitrator. And I think, different arbitrators might have a different batch of clients that have their cases assigned to them. And I think that we've probably had, what have we had, 8 trials, Will?
It's tough to know, but we just finished another trial on Monday. Sure, we'll call it 8. Is it 9 or 10 or 7? I don't know a lot.
So 8 trials, but every one of them is different in some way. Like the procedural rules that apply, the discovery that's available. It just depends so much on the individual arbitrator. But right now, the cases are they run the gamut. Some of them have been concluded. Some of them have been stayed at Valve's request. Of course, Valve has tried everything under the book and even things that aren't in the book to try and stay or dismiss or delay these cases. They've been kicking and screaming from day one. And, they have mostly been unsuccessful, but, they have been able to stay some of them. So the cases are currently sitting in a spectrum of procedural postures from completed to waiting to start.
And outside of suing you, has Valve approached you in any way to say, okay, let's figure this out. Let's settle this. Have they made any efforts in that way?
No, and I think one of the things this highlights is, their contract says you're going to negotiate in good faith from the very beginning, like that. And they don't offer a single client a single dollar. And, it's great. The reason we're talking to you right now is Greg, who's let us talk about his case. He won several $1,000s. And because Valve filed all these motions we had to respond to, we accumulated $700,000 in fees. And so, but literally the day before we won, or maybe it was the Friday before, I don't want to say literally the day before, but before we won that award, they wrote in one of their hundreds of filings in court to try and disrupt this, Mr. Bucher's original settlement offer was outrageous and way more than we could have ever recovered. And man, we asked for a lot less than $700,000 in our settlement offer for Greg, right? But yet, they still are sort of operating under this delusion that we're being unreasonable here. We're not. And at this point, they've really put themselves in a pickle because, I don't know how I'm supposed to say these cases aren't worth a lot of money when we're winning a lot of money for our clients.
Right.
Well, so I think this is really a fun way to use the law. And I kind of want to get to some broader trends and then let's go discussion. But before that, I think one question I have, and I was talking to another lawyer who thinks and does a lot of work with arbitration clauses. And, typically when you bring a class action case or when you just bring a private case of Section 1 or Section 2, you can get money, right, for damages. But if they're doing something that's unlawful, you can also have the judge say, you can't do that anymore, right? And we've seen that over and over in lots of different cases, including when Epic Games sued Google for similar practices. The judge actually didn't give monetary damages because Epic didn't want them, but he did say, all right, here are the illegal things you can no longer do. Have you asked these arbitrators to do that too, to say not just give damages, but to tell Valve they can no longer do the unfair thing that they were doing? Like, can't you get them to stop breaking the law, or do you just get cash?
Sure, so that's a great question. So the first answer is I have individual clients who make their own decision. I actually have 4 clients who tried to do that, and Valve responded by saying, you can't do that. And the arbitrator said, well, if they can't do that, then I think this entire process is not acceptable, and so go to court. And so then those claimants went back to court and revived the class action. So those individuals wanted to seek injunctive relief, and although the arbitrator agreed the contract wouldn't let them, his conclusion wasn't, oh, well, that just means you're out of luck. His conclusion was, well, this is an unenforceable contract now, and so this entire process dissolves and you go back to court. But the other thing you have to understand is telling a company who is comfortable with flagrantly lying and breaking the law that they have to stop breaking the law, there's just words on a piece of paper, right? And a judge has continuing authority. If a judge issues an injunction, you go back to the judge 3 years later, you say, hey, it's not going on. But arbitrations end. When an arbitration is over, it's over. That arbitrator doesn't just sit around and monitor what's going on. And this is a case where, although the documents tell a very, very different story, the official position from Valve is we just don't do this. It's just, we don't do this, and although that position is, I think in the words of Greg's arbitrator, right, clearly not credible, right? But if that arbitrator were to issue an order that says you have to stop doing this, Valve would just say, great, there's nothing for us to do. We don't do this anyways. And so what does that order get for us? The truth is, monopolists monopolize because they like money. And the way to take down a monopoly is to make it more expensive for them to maintain their monopoly than to not maintain it. And so I don't view money damages as some sort of like, oh, we're not solving the problem. I think Valve's lawyers are doing the math. They're saying, well, one case, $700,000. Will's got more than 50,000 cases left.
Right.
There's a lot of zeros and commas on that number. What should we do here? And I think that's how behavior changes. So I know it's kind of a complicated answer, but it's absolutely something we think about. It is something some of our clients have attempted with sort of an interesting result on the side. But for the most part, we focus on getting recoveries for our clients. That's true.
Great. Well, it's happening at an interesting time because, there is just this sort of entire revolution in app stores more generally. We've seen that with Apple versus Epic Games. Google has been in trouble with their app stores. And now we're talking about the PC environment and these cases. I think that the people who set up these app stores kind of think this is the perfect, I don't want to say the perfect crime, but sounds like the perfect crime kind of, that it's the ability to be a gatekeeper, to be a toll booth collector. Somebody else does the work. You're just the middleman distributor and you can take a cut from it. Sounds great. But you guys are showing that actually there's some laws that have to be followed in doing that, and these are problematic. Do you see the same kind of app store architecture enduring in the next several years, given the pressure that not just you, but other companies who are app developers, along with games and along with individual customers are putting on these giant app store monopolies?
Well, look, it's hard to make predictions about the app stores markets generally. There is sort of a perhaps obvious reality that there is so much money being made through these stores. There is a very strong incentive to hang on as long as possible. even if they may know in their head, hey, this cannot last longer than another 5 years. Every day they can maintain this monopoly is a lot of money that they get to, pilfer from Americans. And so they're incentivized to do that. So I don't know that I see a sudden sea change, but one thing that does give me optimism about this market is it is a market where a few competitors who are allowed to freely compete, and by freely compete, I mean compete on price, compete on content, which we didn't get into, allowed to advertise, which we didn't get into in terms of Valve's anti-competitive conduct. They're allowed to do all those things and offer a lower commission. Well, those savings are going to be passed on to customers. And as soon as customers realize, hey, this app store is on average 18% cheaper than this other app store, they'll move over. I don't know that it will be instant. It will take some time. People will need to learn about the other alternatives in the market. That's why advertising is so important. But eventually the shift will happen, and it's not particularly technologically difficult to, instead of having one store on your PC, have 3 stores and learn, hey, Epic only has a 12% commission. The games are usually 18% cheaper there because there's a 30% commission on the other store. I'm going to buy my games on Epic because it's cheaper there. And then when that happens, then Steam's going to be forced to compete. They're going to lower their own commission. And I think we'll see commissions drop to something slightly above, very slightly above marginal cost.
Oh, you're off, Matt.
Sorry, we really appreciate your time and your effort here. I think it's some really quality trolling, and I respect that. And I hope to see, and it's inspiring to see this kind of work from younger lawyers who are really, I think kind of going at the underbelly of what looks like a really bloated economy. So thanks for joining and thanks for what you do.
Absolutely. And one thing I'd like to end on is, I don't feel free to characterize me however you want, but I view this very much as poetic justice. To me, trolling is something that sort of happens in the abstract or is detached from what happens. And I'll send you guys a clip after this. It's like an 8-second clip from them arguing in front of the judges in Washington. But Valve's lawyer gets up there and he's like, you seem to be trying to suggest that this is somehow a problem of Valve's making. And, usually in these settings, they let the lawyer give their argument. And the judge just interrupts him and he's like, that's not debatable. He's just like, yes, this is your problem. What are you talking about? You wrote this contract to do this. You told Mr. Bucher to send you individual emails, and now you want to complain that this is what happened. So I think, sure, you can frame it however you want, but I think this is true poetic justice. This is a company who made a choice that they thought would enable it to evade the law and to evade accountability for their monopolization. And it turns out that was a very bad choice. And they're just having to live with the consequences of that.
That's great.
All right. Well, it's meant the quality trolling is meant with love.
Oh yeah, we don't say that in a bad way.
No,
Not at all.
All right, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Do you want to do the advertising thing? We can insert it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, let me. I'm gonna trigger it. I'll ask you a question and then you can come back. So if another app store could overcome the technical hurdles and sign up a bunch of games, are there problems with getting the word out to gamers? Tell me about the advertising side of this.
Sure, absolutely. So Valve has a policy, and they'll actually admit to this policy, that if you purchase a game through their platform, that game, that piece of software, cannot be used to advertise or even reference other storefronts. And think about how most markets work, right? Take the automobile market. Maybe one company's winning, right? They got most of the customers. But when you drive that car off the lot, you turn on the radio. And what do you hear? You hear advertisements for competing car dealerships. And so the next time you go to buy a car, you think, okay, well, I bought, a Ford this time, but man, it sounds like I should really check out the GM model next time. Nobody thinks that the radios in your car should block advertisements about competing car brands, right?
Right.
But that's exactly what happens in these games is the players care about the games far more than the platform, if they care about the platform at all. And the games also have iterations, right? Like it's not, there's like, we're up to like Final Fantasy 17 or something at this point. I can't even keep track. Players are playing, the latest iteration, the next one's coming out. And so the way a store like Epic would want to compete is say, well, let's not only have a better price, but let's get the word out. Let's tell all the people playing the game that is the earlier version, when you buy the next version, come get it cheaper with us. And Valve prohibits this. In this, you asked earlier about analogies to the App Store cases. This is very similar to the decision we saw from Judge Gonzalez-Rogers in the Apple Store Epic decision, where she said, well, look, you're not a monopoly, but I don't think it's okay for you to be controlling access to what people get once they download the app. And so even if there could be this price competition, that avenue of advertising has been cut off and makes it that much harder for competitors to come in and win market share.
Thank you guys both for being here. This was great. This was really fun.
Organized money.
We have seen, I think, the same monopolization that is happening in one area happens in another area, the same unfair practices that's, they kind of spread, they're like contagious. And, so we are seeing more and more app stores in lots of different places.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that I think there are now app stores for your smart meter. Like there's actually an app store for your, there's
Internet of Things. And so the apps are following the different devices. Yeah.
Everybody sees the profit margins of app stores, and so they want their own. And that's like a thing that happens. But one of the cool things to see here is that the other side is true too. These guys have figured out a way to go at the app store in their area, and they are taking lessons from Epic Games going at app stores and all of the companies that fought against Google and Apple. And I think that you're going to see, or you are seeing, more and more younger plaintiff lawyer types, or just lawyers in general and businesses going at these middlemen in all sorts of unconventional ways, and actually starts to succeed. And they're learning, right? They're going to learn from each other.
Yeah,
so
I think
cool story.
There's two things that's interesting here. One is what you just talked about, that because there are these parallel app store litigations, they're all picking and learning from each other, from the decisions that have been made, the precedents that have been set, and even just the tactics that are being waged here. The other thing that's interesting is this follows in this tradition of arbitration swarms. It's a recent tradition, but this idea that you thought that you were protecting your business when you pushed all the consumers and even your employees into arbitration, but we found a way to make that excruciatingly painful for you. And this has happened in DoorDash. This has also happened to Amazon. And they've actually pulled and changed their arbitration agreements as a result. And it's so much fun to see the tables turned on these companies who thought they set up kind of this perfect hermetically sealed way to block anyone from suing them. It's really delightful.
Yeah, I think I remember... I don't know. I remember some like big tech lawyer or something was like, he wanted to talk to me or something. And I remember I didn't do this, but I wanted to just charge him a junk fee. I wanted to be like, if you want to talk to me, I'm happy to do that for a $20
there's a processing
fee.
Yeah, there's a processing fee. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But so anyway, that's like what this is.
It's like that.
Kind of
Yeah. It's wonderful.
All right. Well, thanks. We'll have another great episode of Organized Money next week. Thanks for listening.
Organized money.